all of this discussion about the transformation of healthcare from frontal to tele of any kind, synchronic, asynchronic, distant monitoring, there's one lingering issue that we should always think about, and that is the threat associated with cyber attacks. You know something about that, don't you, Nimrod?
Indeed. We were naive. At the beginning of the pandemic, we kind of like naively thought maybe the hackers would stop. There'll be like a ceasefire for a while because they understand that the world is suffering for pandemic. Unfortunately, hackers, and primarily, by the way, Chinese hackers, not only that they didn't stop, but they actually accelerated their activity. As we're running a practice for cyber incident response, we started getting more and more cases where clinical facilities, critical manufacturing that relates to the COVID-19, critical actually centers, telecommunication centers, which are necessary at a time of coordinating public policy and response, were all under cyber attack. So we found out that more and more hackers were either disrupting service or affecting the integrity of the data, which made it impossible to trust the data sets. And most of them had the same motivation. They were asking for ransomware. And by the way, the price for ransomware exponentially grew just as the pandemic. If we were accustomed to ransomware attacks that were asking for $10,000s to resume operation, now we've seen with factories in Europe, some essential factories in Europe, some essential clinics and hospitals, we're asking for millions of dollars.
For one
incident. So we had cases where companies that had to do with their critical services or had to do with the hospital services were asked to pay ransomware of millions of dollars. And now it's the dilemma. Would you now keep your policy that you're not negotiating with terrorists or you're not giving up to ransomware attacks, or would you save your operations? And for hospitals, as they were under attack all through 2018 and 2019, most of the time they chose to pay the ransomware. Because one thing that we learned is that the IT infrastructure in most of the hospitals and the clinics was not cyber ready. Many of the hospitals didn't even have CISOs. They didn't have basic
CISO?
Security information manager. They didn't even have basic hygiene, like data control, data encryption. Access to the data was just as easy. And the hackers even abused the remote connections to the hospitals and to the clinics to get this easy access to clinical facilities or to the hospital data sets, affect the integrity, encrypt the data and make it inaccessible to the hospital staff. And we've seen cases again and again that hospitals, clinic, or manufacturing had to deal with a cyber crisis at the time of the COVID-19 crisis.
Let me depict this. So the CEO of a large hospital or a large manufacturing company gets up in the morning, he opens his computer, or one of his chief operating officers opens the computer, and instead of seeing what he usually sees, there's a blank screen telling him, you are now under a ransomware attack. If you do not provide this amount of money within 72 hours, all of your data, your systems, your everything will be encrypted or deleted, and you will have to withhold operations for days. Don't they, all of them, have some kind of a backup plan for this? Just, shut everything down, erase everything, and restart?
And you described it beautifully. That's indeed the case. You come and you have the blue screen with this option. 72 hours, the clock is ticking. What decision you take? Most of the hospitals, unfortunately, did not have a solid, not a backup plan, but kind of like a plan of how resume operation in time of an attack. Many of them were concerned that even if data, they'll be able to go back to the data from backup system, whether it's possible that the hacker affected the integrity of the data. And now let's take a decision. You are the CEO of the hospital. Would you keep operation? Would you keep actually business as usual when data integrity may be affected? And we've seen again and again forensic teams, which are these security companies that come and investigate the matters to come with a conclusion what the scope of the attack and how you can mitigate the attack, sometimes telling the hospital it would take us a few weeks to come to a conclusive answer because you didn't have sufficient logs, you didn't have sufficient data for us to get to the conclusion. So you are now faced with a decision. You have few weeks it would take to come to a decision. What is the scope of the attack and whether data was affected or leaked? Or you can take a decision to pay now and resume operation.
That's a terrible dilemma, right? Because even if you had a plan, and you have a CISO, and you have practiced this, and by now that you know that if you need, you can shut it down and kind of upload additional data, there is always the lingering chance that somehow they got to your repository, they somehow changed the integrity of that data, they're threatening you, and now you need to make a very, very dangerous bet. So no wonder many of them prefer to just pay the ransom and get done with it.
And some of them, by the way, even made it public that they paid. Like the Los Angeles hospital paid $3 million. It got public a year ago. And some of them had another situation to deal with. Their patients' data started trading in the darknet.
Oh, my God.
So now you're faced with the confidentiality and your patient data being traded, and you are facing a dilemma. Would I go and buy my patient's data? You are now bidding to buy back your data.
So I think I'm scared enough at this point to hold that discussion, but the take-home message for everybody involved in this is this is now a time of beyond all of the challenges. There's a great challenge of cybersecurity. If you, obviously, almost everyone have a plan. It is time to also test this plan in view of some of these questions. How do you, in real time, ascertain the integrity of the data that you've had so you can resume your operations without paying the ransomware? So this is, I think, a very important take-home message. Thank you, Nimrod, for these insights. Only a person that's been so well involved in cybersecurity all around the world at this critical time can provide us with this insight. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, man.